Extras. Extras 48 was technically there, but I didn't have much left to say. Episode 49 is still fresh for me, so I think I've got a better extras for you here. First off, the door is not 3D. Okay, mostly kidding, but I was surprised by the many comments about the 3D door. There is definitely no 3D software or CGI involved. I think the reaction to an object appearing to move in 3 dimensions mainly just shows how little real animation happens in TDDC. Basically, I draw this door, and to show it opening, I put the anchor point on the left side where the joints should be, then compress the width. So it starts at 100% width, and the final keyframe is like 50% width, or whatever the number was. Of course, when you play this forward, it looks bad, because the door looks like it has no thickness. 0. In order to show that it's a big, thick door, all I did was create a rectangle the same height as the door, put its anchor point at the top corner of the door, on the side of the door that is moving, and then move the rectangle so that its anchor moves to end up at the same place as the squashed, open door. Then the final step is to set the rectangle's width to 0 at the start, when the door is closed, and then go to the end of the motion where the door is open, as it's going to get, and widen out the rectangle there to represent the thickness. So basically, flatten the door sideways, widen the rectangle, make sure the rectangle moves in sync with the door. It's pretty easy when everything but the motion is all straight lines and right angles. I'll admit, I was super happy with the effect, especially given how little time it took, but Sakuga, it is not. Almost immediately when it showed up in the episode's premiere, a number of people called out the monster in live chat as possibly being a Grisgol from 3rd Ed Monster Manual 3, which honestly made me pretty happy because this was my drawing of an obscure monster. It is based on a description, but doesn't look much like the one picture of a Grisgol that most people have ever seen. So the fact that it was recognizable to some was pretty cool, and also some red meat for the deep 3rd Ed lore masters. What's really cool inside baseball is that this session took place while I was making TDDC years ago, relatively early on. And to introduce the monster, I made this actual flash animation of the Grisgol's helm and body rising out of the silver coins, and the glow from the 2 hollow eyes brightening and merging. I turned my crappy old laptop around and showed that to the players. That's what I made years ago and showed them, those first 2 sequences with the black backgrounds. The Grisgol is a bit of a weird monster, because it's made out of a Lich, but it's actually less powerful than your average Lich, because a Lich is really a template applied to an already high-level powerful spellcaster who will have a giant spell list and probably a lot of buffs and preparations, particularly in their home base. The Grisgol, on the other hand, is a construct designed to follow the orders of, well, whoever beat up a Lich and shoved its soul in a golem. Don't mess with that person, by the way. The Grisgol's spell list is entirely replaced with the extremely weird and arbitrary setup of 1 spell of each spell level. Each day, it can cast 1 level 1 spell, 1 level 2, up through to level 9, which may give you a level 9 spell out of even a weak Lich who would only have had 6 level spells or something, but generally a lot weaker and less flexible. The Grisgol has construct traits instead of undead traits, and they changed its damage reduction from that of a Lich, so that it's a bit of a bait and switch if the party is all prepared for an actual Lich. A bait and Lich, if you will. Other than possibly having literally 1 or 2 higher level spells, the only thing that could potentially make it more dangerous than a CR15 Lich is that the Grisgol is supposed to be immune to magic. And this would have been a good argument for one of those thematic exceptions to my normal replace magic immunity with spell resistance rule, like the Scion Killer Golem in an earlier dungeon whose job is literally to beat up beings that rely entirely on psionics. But I went with the spell resistance anyway because although the party mostly does weapon damage, so they should be okay, I still had a little concern that the combo of Greater Dimension Door and Tentacle Tempest might be too effective at slowing down their damage dealing. Of course, the other difference is, a true magic immune construct can't benefit from targeted spell buffs. The example spell list has Shield, which is range personal, but I wouldn't be able to use energy resistance, which affects a target creature, whereas a spell resistance creature, by rules as written, can drop/resume spell resistance as an action. Or, as I tend to house rule it, can just choose to let through on a spell-by-spell basis, though a monster without detailed magical knowledge would have to trust that you're really casting Cure Serious Wounds like you promised, and not zapping it with Feeble Mind while its defenses are down. Either way, while they were trapped into vision, it had time to cast Resist Energy Fire and Greater Dimension Door. So on the one hand, the Rajas were right that it was an entity whose upfront magical output outclasses the party. I think they are level 13. Yes, it's sad how hard a time I have keeping track, but it usually doesn't get mentioned in the recordings unless people gain a level. So their top spells are level 7, and though level 9 spells vary tremendously in quality, a good one can be pretty scary. However, with only one spell each of the higher levels, it would very quickly end up back in the kind of spells Black could cast and soon dropping to pretty wimpy stuff. Despite the built-in Lich paralysis on its melee, it really can't threaten these PCs that way. So I chose its spells for sustained damage over time, instead of opening with a couple big upfront damage spells and then run out of steam. Its main defense was to use the move action teleport from Greater Dimension Door to keep the tentacles of its huge battlefield control spell between it and foes, which should prevent all of them from attacking it each round, and prevent any of them from full attacking, since you can't do that after moving more than 5 feet. All of which would significantly limit the incoming damage. But when it failed that save against Little One's Disrupting Strike, it lost that movement for a round and got brutalized by those heavily buffed full attacks. As much as it got shafted by the one save, though, it wasn't that unlikely. Little One's reasoning was exactly right, that as a golem, it had pretty bad saves against those few things which affect it. Yes, there must be at least 1,000 official and third-party printed spells in 3.5 edition D&D, but I went ahead and invented my own. The big boy version of Evert's Black Tentacles. I arbitrarily decided it should count as an evil spell in addition to its other types, because a level 4 amount of tentacles, you can make excuses. But this number of tentacles, you've crossed a line. I really didn't think through the positioning of the zones that well in the battle shown in the video, but overall the purpose was to control the battlefield while the Grisgol teleported back and forth across, forcing the heroes to move through or around it. But it could be even more obnoxious for blocking a long hallway or preventing a large force from advancing. And I was going for maximum coverage, but the spell can stack to be even more clingy. Tentacle Tempest, Conjuration Creation, and Evocation, Cold and Evil. Level 9 spell, range medium, casting time standard action, components SVM, material component being a tentacle from an outsider, abomination, or magical beast. The area is 4 20-foot radius spreads, each being a 20-foot high cone. Duration 1 round per level, saving throw none, spell resistance no. The saving throw and spell resistance are the same as Evert's. As you chant, a black void opens up in your palm, consuming the tentacle. Your eldritch chanting intensifies as you point your palm, opening matching voids, portals to the edge of reality. And from those portals emerge countless strands of vile, frigid blackness, grasping at anything that comes near. Upon casting, place 4 20-foot radius, 20-foot high cylindrical spreads, what we will call zones, within range, such that the center of each is within 50 feet of the center of at least one other zone, but such that no map square or hex is overlapped by more than 2 zones. Each zone must have its base affixed to a surface, ground, wall, ceiling. Each zone deals 2d6 cold damage per round, and the tentacles rising from each zone attempt to grapple all creatures at the time of casting, as creatures enter the zone, and all creatures within the zone at the beginning of the caster's turn. Grapple check DC 24, with no to-hit roll required. If a creature is within 2 overlapping zones, only 1 grapple attempt is made, but the DC is increased by 2 to 26, and they suffer cold damage from both areas, total of 46. Creatures grappled by the tentacles take 2d6 plus 8 bludgeoning damage per round. The tentacles are immune to damage and status effects, and all movement in the areas is halved. This does not count as difficult terrain, and the tentacles provide partial cover. If you had a hard time keeping track of all the buffs in that fight, it's probably because they're a mess. I tried to capture what all happened from my recording, but there's a good chance that we messed up in some places when actually playing it out. At the beginning you had haste, which at Mora's caster level was fine for the whole battle. But then stacking bard buffs, the heroism type one that gives temp HP and +2 to most d20 rolls is single target. Now her buffs last 5 rounds after she stops singing, or switches to another song, or casts a spell. So she does 1 heroism. Next round, the second one, and the first one has 5 rounds left. Next round, she uses the area morale bonus song, leaving 4 rounds on heroism 1 and 5 on heroism 2. Then they lose 2 rounds to visions, and it takes multiple rounds before the Grisgol shows up. So those buffs were gone. It is a little unclear from the recording if Mora was using that time with no visible enemy to restart all 3 songs, but I think she did. Certainly everyone was adding them later on. And I think there was at least once somebody added +2 to hit from Holy weapon buff, which Bane does because it's so specific to a creature type, but Holy doesn't because affecting anything evil is already quite strong. By the end, I wasn't even sure who had taken Bane Undead and who had taken Holy, given some people also had the weapon crystal of +1d6 versus Undead. It's hard to sort it all out from a low-quality recording with people talking over each other. We don't know much about Black's dad at this stage. Black's mother is out of the picture, and William Gabriel Black was a priest of Sirius who told his son tall tales of this hero called Rygax, who fought the evil vampire kings in the Shadowfell. Kings beneath a shallow sky. Wings they have, but not to fly. But Gabriel disappeared before Black was an adult. He was thought dead by the Hand, and our Black followed in his footsteps, never expecting to see him again. Now he is found, but can he recover? What is left of this man, on whose broad frame hangs such gaunt, weary flesh? And other Darkest Dungeon-like narration. And lastly, I missed this paragraph when recording the Patreon preview version, but I didn't realize I had missed it until patron Timofey Prazilov asked me about this. The post-credit scene showed a Mindhunter, in fairly cartoony style, just going for ambiance with the music, finding and recovering the Lich's phylactery with ease. Although it looks like it stunned the Razormaw, like a hands-off version of the Lich's paralysis touch, and that would make sense for a Mind Flayer, that's not exactly it. The creature was actually dominated, which is why when the Mindhunter turned to leave, it just followed behind them. I had wanted to show a little bit more, having the Mindhunter wave its hand over the box once, nothing happens, then wave its hand a second time, clearing the wards and opening the box. But I didn't want to make the scene longer, and the music was fitting in the way I wanted, so I just went with this shorter version. The one last thing of note, though, and I realize I didn't have any visual shorthand to indicate this, but this particular scene does not necessarily happen in the present. I want to thank all you amazing Patreon patrons for making Operation Awesome Unemployment a reality in less than a month now, but also for asking a whole bunch of good questions on the Patreon preview of this video. William Bailey asked, are those real Lovecraftian tentacles from an eldritch being, or just black magic given form? They are actual one-way portals, but how Lovecraftian the tentacles really are is going to depend on the setting. In the world of TDDC, I'm leaning more toward congealed evil energy from the ends of the astral sea, as opposed to specific nameless beings. Essed Banal asked, what exactly did Swain do to the Lich? It was the Drow who enslaved his village. Did Swain kill the villagers later? And if so, why does the Lich, who already parted ways with them, care? As we saw briefly in the second vision, the shaman's plan involved trying to skirt the territory of a vampire king. Judging by the latest vision, one may deduce that they were not successful. So he was, in fact, destroyed trying to avenge the village that had shunned him. There are many valid interpretations of his story and of how noble or ignoble he was, but he clearly had a serious hero complex, for better or for worse. Xylem asked, in the final vision, how did the Lich manage to underestimate Swain so much? One would think that an intelligent spellcaster from the Shadowfell would know the approximate power level of a vampire king. Unfortunately for him, few have witnessed the kings fighting each other one-on-one, and otherwise, they don't have a lot of occasion to go all out. And it's possible to be very intelligent, yet still fall victim to one's own overconfidence, and, in this case, hero complex. A huge ongoing sunlight-based plasma spread should do the trick, right? Xylem also asked, it appears from the post-credit scene that you've changed the original Grisgol creation rule, which called for the phylactery to be incorporated into the construct. But since Swain controlled the former Lich, wouldn't he also know about the hiding place of the phylactery and attempt to retrieve it? I did change it, that the phylactery does not have to be contained within the Grisgol. It makes more sense to me that it is not, just in my humble opinion. But you would still have to possess the phylactery in order to create the construct. Arthur D. Gonzalez Martin asked, was Black's dad ever foreshadowed? only the lightest, vaguest foreshadowing imaginable, though, as had been all guessed it years ago through what I would call narrative reverse engineering. We knew Black's dad was not around. When Black was a kid, his dad told him tales of Rygax running around the Shadowfell and fighting the Vampire Kings. There was the post-credits scene with Swain, where one of his lieutenants asked, "What of the other bait?" Though in a thick Elvish accent. That's about it. But with narrative reverse engineering, you look for loose strands and try to put them together. It sounded like Swain was trying to bait Rygax, one loose strand. And who else had we ever heard of with a connection to the Shadowfell? It was a good educated guess, but not the kind of foreshadowing where viewers were expected to guess the answer. As for in-game, the players didn't have access to the bad guy vision from the post-credits scene, so they had very little chance to predict in advance. But even then, Draven's player put it together in virtually no time just by seeing Black's player's reaction as he read the note I passed him with the identity of the hooded figure. Esed Banal asked another one. Are vows of chastity optional for Sirius's priests, or was it one of those priest falls in love, breaks vows, leaves priesthood to raise children deals? The vows of chastity are optional, though many priests of Sirius take them because it means devoting yourself to protecting everyone, rather than being tempted to choose your family over others. William Bailey asked, how much input did the player of Zahir have from this episode onwards, now that he's rescued? I'm afraid Zahir's player isn't around. He's purely NPC-ified ever since the player left and the character was, conveniently, kidnapped. Leah E. Williams asked, just how dead is Pelor? Do none of his magics linger? Are there no consequences for the desecration of his temple? At the very least, I imagine it would anger Balvan. Seems pretty dead. Delvash has his healing domain, while the sun domain is now held by Raus, a demigod. Was he a regular spirit who got promoted? Who knows? It's hard to say if a destroyed god is 100% gone, since you regularly can't erase a spirit completely from the astral sea. But then again, we don't hear about anybody trying to erase some normal spirit with the death equation. Warsaw asked, how did you approach building the treasure hoard? Random magic item table rolls, or designing specific items to go into coin piles? I pretty much never use the random tables, especially for this group. There would only be a very narrow band of results that aren't either A, useless or inferior to Draven's crafting, and thus unexciting disenchantment bait, or B, somehow broken or overpowered, admittedly pretty unlikely at this level. So, random items would mostly just get sold for cash or converted into XP by Draven. If I want interesting treasure that actually has a chance to excite them, I pretty much have to choose and design all the items myself. Thanks so much for your support, with a special shout out to Aether Mordu, Arkin, Bedimir, Bigrin, Brethren, Corlin, Duskmar, Fireborn, Fright Knight, Earl of Sanguine, Gandurk, Get Hype, Gorfiend, Greenmute, Nine, Hakun, John, Lonito, Lord Avon, Malison Desh, OI1, Olden Man, Pedrig of Rooney, Ramar Ulfist, Stan the Man, Starfall, Surf USA, Tambu and June, Valis, Volkfang, Zombie, and Warsaw, the members of the organization. So many. So thank you.